الحمد لله الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحابته أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم زدنا ولا تنقصنا وأكرمنا ولا تهنا وأعطنا ولا تحرمنا وآثرنا ولا تؤثر علينا وارض عنا ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, it's an honor to be here, not only for the day but for the weekend, and especially to be a guest of all of you, and in particular a guest of Sheikh Imam Hamid Shibli, who I've known for a number of years, although our relationship hasn't been very close. Naturally, one, because of course I'm so much younger than he is. Sheikh Hamid, has been Imam for more than about 2/3 of my own life. And, so he's definitely something very great and enormous, immense in my heart. And, I've been to a number of his talks and been inspired by him, as well as by the talks of his brothers, Sheikh Muhammad and Jamal Shibli. As a matter of fact, before going to Zaytuna in 2007, I actually worked at the State Correctional Institution at Chester, which actually was a post that I took over after Sheikh Hamid's brother Jamal Shibli. He actually was Imam there prior to me becoming the Imam, so it is a sort of a history of connection. And I call him Sheikh, and I know that he usually prefers Imam, or the humility, of course, leads him to take that title. But I personally am of the view that Imam is a more dignified, noble title than the title Sheikh, because often the title Sheikh can be simply a reference to how old you are, or sometimes it can be a reference to just you have a certain type of academic accomplishment. But the issue of being Imam, I was Imam for 5 years, and the time that I spent as Imam is a time of my life. Inshallah. No, I have to do this. But it's something that I would, an experience that I would never, hope to lose the benefits of that experience in my life. I think because sometimes we have come back from overseas, or we finish our studies, and we think that people are supposed to respect us simply because I studied Islam. But the job of an Imam is extremely difficult, as we know, and he would know. Of course, he'd tell you over the years, and having to deal with, of course, deaths and funerals and marriages and marriage counseling, and you get to know the community gets to know you, and sometimes people don't like you, and so it's a very difficult job. It's not an easy job. He's been doing this for a very long time, so alhamdulillah, Allah's given him tawfiq. So again, I just wanted to just let you know just how grateful I am to be here, and to be given an audience by you. The second thing, of course, today I wanted to speak about what I call reevaluating our response to Islamophobia, and it's the type of presentation or type of talk I want to give is one that is somewhat different than what you may be accustomed to. That I'm less concerned with a sort of one-way sort of type of engagement, although I do have a lecture to give tonight, but I'm hoping that that there will be questions and comments that come up during this particular talk after I introduce some thoughts or some things to sort of ponder over that will lead us to have some very useful exchange, and we will learn from one another. We will learn from one another as opposed to just simply being one way and me telling you that this is what we're supposed to do, this is the way we're supposed to see it. In order to, before I go into the more uneasy aspects of this particular conversation, I do want to preface this with some reminders with relationship to what we are in this world and what we are with relationship to our Creator, that we are Muslims, that we are believers. And we're not just like other people, even though the impulse that many of us have because of all the pressures of being in American society today is that we try to highlight, oh, we're no different than you are. But Muslims are not different. Muslims are not the same as other people. We are different, and we do. And I don't think that any Muslim should feel uneasy about feeling that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has done something special with you and to you, and hopefully we do things through you for the benefit of yourselves and those around you. And that's the first thing in terms of our identity, that we are Muslims and we should be proud of that. We should hold our heads up high. The second thing is that to understand, while being Muslim and being a believer, that the Prophet ﷺ, as well as the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran over and over reminds us of the fact that by making this claim and entering into the fold of Iman or faith or Islam, that what comes with that a number of tests and trials and tribulations. That this dunya is a place of tribulation. It's not a place of permanence for us. And for that reason, anytime we are faced by challenges in this dunya, we do our best not to run away from those challenges and not sort of struggle against the forces around us who are trying to restrict our lives and our livelihood or whatever it may be. That we need to have some courage at times in order to protect our rights and protect our freedoms. And so the Quran reminds us of this. Do you think you just left alone saying that you believe and you won't be tested? And the Prophet ﷺ reminded one companion who complained one time about the tribulations and trials that were coming to them from the mushrikeen. He said, the people before you had the flesh raked off of their bones, right? And they didn't leave their deen. They did not turn back on their heels in spite of all of those pressures. And sometimes when I look at certain Muslims, it seems that a little bit of pressure leads us to try to compromise our basic teachings and our principles, our ethics, our morals, just so that we can be accepted. And I understand the impulse, especially hopefully you understand more why I take the position that I do in this particular regard. But in one hadith we heard about Imam Muslim in Sahih, he mentions that the Prophet ﷺ has said that the similitude of the believer is as the similitude of a zara. And a zara, of course, is a word that takes many different translations. That the word zara is the green crop, the one that stands up tall. Sometimes it's translated as corn, or sometimes it's a reference to wheat or barley. That the believer is like a zara. And the zara itself, the nature of it is that, as said in the hadith, لا تزال الريح تميله, that the wind continues to make it slant. وَلَا يَزَالُ مُؤْمِنُ يُصِيبُهُ الْبَلَاءُ, and the believer remains in a state where tribulation comes to him in the same way that the zara, right, does. The wind comes and blows and pushes you this way and it pushes you that way, it pushes you that way, right? And the similitude of the unbeliever or the hypocrite is as the similitude of the rice plant, as it says. It says, لا تهتز حتى تستحسن, that it doesn't sort of shake or waver until someone pulls it up and plucks it out from the ground. Because the rice, as you know, is usually covered with water, and you got to reach down. Basically, those type of people who are not rocked or shaken or visited by tribulation in the way that Muslims are visited by tribulation. But this is our state, that we will have those type of trials, those tribulations that will come to us over and over. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions a number of verses that reminds us of, one, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not lost control of His creation and in our lives. but also teaches us that those tribulations and things that come to us are to teach us certain lessons. So if we reflect upon the Battle of Uhud, and I'm going to speak a little bit about that, and then speak about some lessons from Hudaybiyah before I get into, like I said, the more uneasy aspects of tonight's conversation. In Uhud, we find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds the believers of the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already given them victory the year before. In one verse, Allah says to them, أَوَلَمَّا أَصَابَتْكُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ قَدْ أَصَبْتُمْ مِثْلَيْهَا قُلْتُمْ أَنَّا هَذَا. So, and will it be that when an affliction that comes to you, the like of which you have already afflicted the twice that amount before you to others, will it be that when that happens you say, how could such a thing happen? أَنَّا هَذَا. And then he says, قُلْ هُوَ مِنْ عِنْدِ أَنفُسِكُمْ. Say it is from yourselves. Say it is from yourselves. Meaning this is why this affliction comes to you. That this is from yourself. The hypocrites, they would say, when something bad happened to them, they say, هَذَا مِنْ عِنْدِكَ. They would say to the Prophet, this is from the Prophet. And when something good happened, they say, هَذَا مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ. This is from God. They wouldn't attribute it to being following the Prophet, but when it came to the bad stuff, it's like, oh, none of this would have happened if we weren't following this man. Right? You know, but Allah tells the Prophet, tells them, كُلُّ مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ. Say, all of it is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Both the good and the bad. فَمَا لِهَؤُلَاءِ الْقَوْمِ لَا يَكَادُونَ يَفْقَهُونَ حَدِيثًا. What's wrong with these people? It's as if they can't understand the slightest event or the lesson from a single event. And then after this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا أَصَابَكَ مِنْ حَسَنَةٍ فَمِنَ اللَّهِ. And whatever good comes to you is from God. وَمَا أَصَابَكَ مِنْ سَيِّئَةٍ فَمِنْ نَفْسِكَ. And he's speaking directly to the Prophet. And any bad that comes to you is from yourself. What's really complicated, it's like we just say, all is from Allah, then now he's saying, it's from me. Then he say to the mushrikeen that they should say, no, it's all from God. And so that's because the first sayyi'ah, the first bad, is different than the second sayyi'ah. Right? Because what they're using as an excuse, they said that, this bad stuff that comes to us is because of following this man. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it come to you because of some things that you have done. And what it was the second part, basically just talking about how, yes, that good and bad will come to you, but one of the main things we need to remember is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring bad things to you as a redemption. That punishment at times is redemptive, meaning that the punishment or chastisement often is meant to purify you. It's meant to purify you, and there's a great wisdom in that. That punishment for sins at times is a result of the fact that we haven't repented from certain other sins. So often when things come to us and we say, for instance, somebody slanders us, that the way of the early people would be like, well, I must have done something bad, right? When people harm us, they backbite us, they slander us, they say, well, Allah brings this tribulation among us. It must be because of something I've done, right? It must be, I should think about, maybe I slandered somebody before. Maybe I've committed backbiting against somebody before. When people, they exhibit bigotry and racism toward us. It's asking, well, maybe, I have to think about, maybe I did this to somebody as well, and this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making me taste of what I've done myself, as a way to wake me up. So when Muslims, for instance, living under oppressive governments, they would say, well, I have to make tawbah, that we need to return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It has to be something we did wrong. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُوا مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. That Allah doesn't change what is with the people until they change what is with themselves. Right? And so that was sort of the attitude that the Muslims have had throughout most of our history, that we would blame ourselves first. Always, you see. And so when things happen, so I remember that Allah said there's going to be tribulations. Second of all, that sometimes the tribulations are because of, things that we've done to other people, and then sometimes because of, it may be faulty planning. So when we look at Uhud, for instance, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to them that don't say of something that happens to you, the price of the like you have already made happen to others. Don't say, how could this happen? Say it's from yourselves. What happened in Uhud? A number of things, of course, happened. We know that Badr, we know, was the victory for the Muslims. And that victory led to 70 of the mushrikeen being killed and 70 of them being captured. And then in Uhud, 70 of the Muslims were killed in Uhud. And so you've done twice to others before you. But the failure of the Muslims in Uhud were for a number of reasons. For one, when the Prophet ﷺ first decided to consult the Sahaba about the strategy, they heard that the mushrikeen were coming and they wanted to meet them in battle. The Prophet, he felt, okay, we should stay in Medina. We shouldn't go out. We should stay here. And the Shabab, the young people who were in that Badr, who wanted to fight and prove their valor. And I was like, no, we should go out and meet them. Let's go out and meet them. And the Prophet, he kept trying to convince them that, no, I think it'd probably be a good idea. We fight here in the city. We know the city. They don't know the city. And they continued until they pressed the Prophet. And the Prophet, instead of saying, okay, I agree with you, he just simply went, turned around, went inside his house, put on his chainmail, came back out. Sahaba felt bad now. They felt that they had coerced the Prophet into taking their view on this issue. And they said, Ya Rasulullah, we didn't mean to compel you into this. And he said it's not appropriate for a prophet, after he puts on his chainmail, to take it off until he meets the enemy in battle. So let's go. All right? So, okay, first issue here, resistance to the Prophet ﷺ. Not that the Prophet can't be resisted. We know from Badr that the Prophet had an idea, had a strategy, and some Sahabi disagreed with the strategy. And the Prophet then, he yielded to that idea. They'd go to the battle. The Prophet, stay there. Archers here, right? Those people guard me, right? Some people posted over there. The Muslims start to win the battle. The enemies start to flee. Those who are up on the hill, they say, hey, battle's over. They see all the other Muslims, the other soldiers there grabbing up all the spoils, right? They're going to take all the spoils. They're not going to leave anything for us, right? So they rush down. And they told, no, the Prophet said, don't leave your posts. The battle's over. We're going to go. They rush down. Khalid ibn Walid sees this from afar. He flanks them. He comes back, and we know what happened. The Prophet ﷺ is injured. The truth is broken. He is hit over his head, and blood is coming from his head. And so you see that, okay, because now turiduna arad ad-dunya, seeking the goods of this world, right? Wallahu yurid al-akhirah. Seeking the goods of this world, the distracted Sahaba now to go and leave their posts, not obeying the Amir and Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, and it leads to 70 Muslims getting killed. Right. So that's the first issue. And I bring this up again because it shows an example of how the wrong intention, right, could lead to failure. That who min indi anfusikum. No, it's from yourselves. Don't ask how did it happen. Say no, it's because of you. It's what you did, because it's from your not obeying, your lack of a good strategy for victory, right? Your lack of patience, your impatience. Hudaybiyah, as we know, there have been a lesson from that as well. And we know what happened in Hudaybiyah. The Prophet, he signs a treaty with the mushrikeen amongst the conditions that 10 years of peace. And Muslims could pretty much go anywhere they wanted to go. The Prophet ﷺ could preach Islam to anybody he wanted to. But also amongst the conditions was that, okay, if any of the Meccans come to the Prophet ﷺ accepting Islam, that the Prophet had to send them back. And if any of the Muslims left the Prophet's camp and went to the Meccans, that they would not send them back to the Prophet. Right? So it was a concession. Amongst the concessions as well, that you want to sign Rasulullah. And so they said, if we believed you were Rasulullah, we would never have fought you from the beginning. And so the Prophet concedes, okay, no problem. Scratch it out. Ali ibn Abi Talib refuses. Show me where it is. He scratched out Rasulullah. Muhammad ibn Abdullah, right? Conceded. And so sometimes we can look at this concession that the Prophet ﷺ and say, okay, there's a lesson to take from this. And yeah, but we as Muslims, we can take concessions, right? So in light of the pressures that we have from the broader society, then we can kind of concede and say, well, you know what, we'll just, we'll condemn, we'll apologize, we'll even support certain types of immorality for the sake of being integrated in society. But we can't forget that the Prophet's concessions, ﷺ, they were concessions of a much more profound nature. Because his concessions, what did it do? More important than anything else is that it opened up for him the opportunity to preach Islam to people who would have not gotten that opportunity. And he had confidence in his message. He knew that he talked to enough people that they had no reason to reject this message. So it was a victory. Inna fatahna laka fathan mubina. That we have opened up for you a great victory. It was a victory for the Prophet ﷺ, even though Sahaba thought it was a sign of weakness, that it was a failure at first. Allah revealed those verses. So we have to be sure that when we make an analogy, that we make an accurate analogy, a consistent analogy. So those are the preliminary things I wanted to bring up. Now, the current approach to our response to what we call Islamophobia has been fundamentally an approach where Muslims have been encouraging or insisting that we take a very gentle approach. And we say, yeah, okay, the Prophet ﷺ was gentle. He is rahmah lil alameen. He was always gentle, and he didn't offend people, that he didn't make people feel uneasy. And this has gone so far even to the point that Islam no longer means submission. Islam now means peace, right? Prior to 9/11, Islam meant submission. But all of a sudden, Islam means peace. Of course, peace through submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it's peace for us. And if it's peace within us, then it's peace for others as well, right? But Islam means submission. And so we've stretched certain definitions. And we've presented the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in one single light. That is, as he's always just simply going to not push back. He's never going to struggle. He's never going to show courage, right? When you read the Quran, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say to the Prophet to do? Ya ayyuhan nabiyyu, jahid al-kuffara wal-munafiqina waghluz alayhim. O Prophet, struggle against the kuffar. And the kuffar, you have to understand that pretty much any time the kuffar mentioned in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about what we call Ahl al-Harb, al-Harbi, the person who is at war with Islam. The people who are hostile to the Muslims. Almost any time it's mentioned, that's what he's talking about. Those who are hostile at war to the Muslims. Jahid al-Kuffar, struggle against the kuffar. Wal-Munafiqeen, and the hypocrites. Waghluz alayhim, and be stern, be firm against them. Right? So when we present the Prophet ﷺ as only just soft. So, I mean, we're not giving the full picture of our Prophet's character, right? And I can understand why we do that, and eventually, hopefully, you'll understand as well why I say this. And so, every time something happens in our community, and a Muslim is accused, or a person is said to be Muslim is accused of doing something, that our approach has been one of condemnation, or apology, or apologetic, or condemnatory apologetics, I like to call it. Condemnatory apologetics. And that means like sometimes we don't say sorry, but through the objection, through the condemnation, is as if we're saying sorry. For what someone did we don't even know, right? That we didn't order them to do it, right? And we complain all the while about stereotypes, about how, why do you stereotype the Muslims? Why are you trying to say that Muslims are terrorists, all Muslims are terrorists? See, that we're different. Right? What those people are doing is not Islam, right? And we want people don't judge us as an entire group and try to say all of us are like that person. But we have to realize that when we stand up and we try to speak for all the Muslims, that all we do realistically at the end is reinforce the idea that I'm like that person. You understand what I'm saying? Basically, if I don't want them to place me in a single category with a violent individual, then I shouldn't have to apologize for that person, or I shouldn't apologize for what that person has done. Of course, condemning is, that has its place, but it's important for us to also think about who we are apologizing to, who are we condemning for, and I'm going to come to that as well. But anytime we stand up and we apologize or we condemn what a single Muslim does, it sends the message that, oh, I guess that you do play a part in that. Well, the Quran teaches us that no bearer of burdens will bear the burden of another. This is also the Christian tradition that teaches the same thing. That if one soul does something, doesn't mean everybody knows that the other souls are not responsible for it. So why should I apologize? It's like, there was a woman who had interviewed me about 2 weeks ago, maybe a week ago, as a matter of fact, USA Today, came to Zaytuna. And she had asked me the question. She said, when the Boston bombings occurred, did it make you feel like, I hope it's not a Muslim? And I said to her, no. And she said, why? Why not? And I said to her, well, listen, I'm an African American. And being an African American doesn't place me in the same situation that my brethren are in. That if you're honest, I'm talking to her just like this, if you're honest, that the word Muslim is a very racialized term. When white America, non-Muslim white America sees the word Muslim, there's a picture, an image pops into their heads. And I'm saying all this to her. She's a white American as well. And it means brown people or olive-colored skinned people from the East. Right? And I said, am I right? She said, yeah. She actually agreed with me. That's what she thought when she's Muslim, that's what it is for her, right? Whereas like me, I'm an African American, Muslim, and I don't have a sense of, I don't feel alienated. I already feel like I'm a true American, that my way of being an American is authentic, is accepted as being authentic. And this is an important point I want to highlight because often when we start to speak on behalf of the Muslims, right, in America, that we have to understand that there's this difference that does exist. That we cannot deny, if we're trying to integrate into America, you cannot integrate into America if you don't understand the social dynamics of America and the history of America. And understand that those dynamics are still largely what are fueling what we call Islamophobia. When Islamophobia in reality is nothing more than anti-Arab racism. That's what Islamophobia is. Islamophobia is anti-Arab racism because the average American doesn't even know what an Arab is. They just, you see they attack Sikhs. Right? Oh, an Arab, right? You might attack a Mexican. Yeah, Arab. And I say it's anti-Arab racism because when you look at the victims of Islamophobia crimes or hate crimes, and you see the perpetrators of them as well, that there's a normative face here, there's a normative face there. Right? Usually you're talking about an Eastern person who's being attacked or someone perceived to be from the East. Because a lot of times white American Muslims with sisters especially when they put on a hijab, all of a sudden the Americanness is kind of erased, right, from them. That they're perceived as maybe Syrian or something like that. Right? They're perceived that way in the eyes of, we call the mainstream America, white America. And again, this is not about racism. In the sense, and I'm not promoting hatred of white people. But it is a reality that we as Muslims have to come to accept. And it's like we accept it, we already do accept it, but in many ways it's as if we are afraid to state it. The obvious, you see. Because when we think about it like this, when Muslims apologize, we send out a national apology or national condemnation of anything that a supposed Muslim did. Ask yourself, who are you directing that condemnation and apology to? Are you directing that condemnation and apology to Black America, Latino America, Hispanic America, Indian America, Japanese, Chinese America, right? You understand what I'm saying? That when you condemn, who are you condemning it for? Who are you directing that condemnation towards? So it's if we know there's a racial element involved here, but we're afraid to deal with it as Muslims, to highlight it, to bring it up. And it will be, and I believe that it's through actually bringing that and raising the reality of what's happening in America, that's actually one thing that can get the monkey, get the man, but like we say, get the man off your back a little bit. You give you some space. Because if you look at, there are this footage you can find, for instance, on Fox News. Ibrahim Hooper from CARE, he had an interview one year, and he sort of lost his cool, as we would say, on one of the interviews, and he said, "You guys are racist." And the Fox News reporters, all of a sudden, they got defensive. They're like, "Oh, why is it always got to be about race?" And all of a sudden, it's about race. Whereas, if you say, I'm Islamophobic, right? You afraid of Muslims? Yeah, I'm an Islamophobe, right? Do you follow me? I can. So racism sort of it hides behind calling people Muslims. It's the same thing. I remember in the preliminary campaign between Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. I believe I won't mention the state, but one of the states, right, in the South, they voted for Hillary Clinton. And I remember seeing this on the news. Then they interviewed a woman and asked her why she did not vote for Obama. And she said, because he's a Muslim. And so the reporter said to her, well, he actually is not a Muslim, he's a Christian. He said, well, I don't believe it. I think he's a Muslim. Now, African Americans, we see something else through that. It's like, well, yeah. Because it's okay to be anti-Muslim. But it's not okay to be anti-black. It's not okay to be anti-anything, anti-Chinese, anti-gay, but it's okay to be anti-Muslim. Right? So racists can hide behind the term Islamophobia. Now, Islamophobia is a legitimate term. But I think that we have to really think about the type of messages we send to what we call mainstream America or white America through the terminology we utilize and the approach that we take. Because, for instance, even, CARE, and I support CARE. Totally. I don't always agree with things, but I agree with most of what comes out of CARE. I support CARE and their efforts, they're important efforts. But if you just look at what the letters stand for, right, actually the C stands for what again? Let's see. Council on American Islamic Relations. American Islamic. I mean, what the message does that send? I mean, I'm not saying they need to change their name, but you already are making it seem as if there's something different, or there's a dichotomy between an American and being Islamic. That they're sort of opposed, that we have to negotiate a truce between Americans and Islamic peoples. You know, so there's this idea that American, there's, again, the prototypical American we have in mind that we're trying to convince, and then, you know, these Islamic guys, we're not really Americans, we're like, you know, we're just visiting, right? You know, and all that does is it sort of continues to flame it places more fuel in the fire, because the problem is that the mainstream America sees Muslims as an invading force. That these people are coming from the outside to corrupt the purity of the American society. They come here to their stealth, their what do you call it? The sneaky Sharia, whatever they call it, the creeping Sharia, right? That we're trying to take over. I mean, listen, you already got the Sharia's already in America, you know. But it's like the people are not smart enough. A lot of people are not smart enough to know it. But it's this idea of a foreign force, why immigration is such a big deal, right? It's not just the Mexicans. It's like, you know, all these people, because like they're looking at these statistics and people are talking about a certain number of years and whites are going to be a minority, you know, and so like this anxiety for people, because what they believe is that America was established for them, and it was to a certain extent, because if you go back to the very beginning. And not all, and there's a sort of a racial hierarchy. Not all white people call white today, were considered white, you know, in the beginning. You know, they're mainly talking about your white Anglo-Saxon Protestants who established this. And so in 1790, George Washington oversaw the first Naturalization Act, and included in that act was condition for citizenship was that you had to be a free white man, right? And it meant Anglo-Saxon. It didn't mean Jew or Catholic or Italian, because like they really didn't become fully white until mid-20th century, realistically. You know, and then at one time, you know, in order for you to become an American, you had to, once blacks got the right to citizenship, and then the natives as well, you have to prove, you know, you're either white or you're black or you're native, you see, in order for you to be considered a real American. But then the 60s, that changed. You no longer had to identify it that way. And so, but the sort of cognitive sort of, you know, structure is still operating in the minds of a lot of whites, you know, that this is our country, right? And your people are invading. And so it's important to understand the racial element involved with all of this. And so again, the issue of condemnation, who we direct them towards. You know? If we, you know, why is it that Muslims, for instance, again, to further prove my point here, I think you understood my point, but I just want to just emphasize for those who may not have understood it. Last year in Philadelphia, there were some Muslims who dressed up as sisters, women. They had niqab, they covered their faces, and they went and robbed a bank. And they killed a police officer, and one of the brothers were killed. Now, there was did we sort of send like an apology or condemnation to the non-Muslims of Philadelphia, right? We didn't do that. We didn't sort of say, hey, we condemn the act, this sort of, you know, violent act committed by a Muslim. Yeah. But it is, like I said, emphasizes, you know, the whole racial element that's involved here. And it's about power. It's about power. And just a few more things before I open things up. I think that the condemnations are appropriate to an extent. I'm not sure if an apology is ever appropriate for what other people have done. I think it further reinforces the stereotype, as we say. On the other hand, we have to acknowledge that there is a difference between the convert community and the non-convert community. They're not all the same as we know. And what I mean by that is, you know, the American convert, the white American, the black American, right, convert, and then we say the rest of you, the most of you, that there's a difference. I was at the University of San Francisco about a month ago, and I gave a talk about the history of Islam in Black America. And there was a young lady who had raised her hand, non-Muslim, raised her hand and asked the question, what's the biggest challenge for Muslims in America? And I had to pause because I just felt that it wasn't possible for me to really answer that question, because unless I assume that all the Muslims are the same, and our needs are the same, and our desires are the same, and our conditions are the same, right? So I said to her, well, it differs according to who you're dealing with. That for me and my people, that our challenges are more like, we need jobs, right? Problems with drugs, you know, need to get people to stop killing one another, right? Amongst other things, just general moral decadence in our communities. You know, now the more recent immigrants, on the other hand, challenges of integration, right? Accepted into America as being a legitimate or an authentic sort of iteration of Americanness, right? That's more their challenge. And because of that difference, I think that there's a way for us to achieve the goals of both groups of people. And of course, there are always nuances. You know, not everybody's uniform, even amongst the converts. Not everybody's uniform, even amongst the more recent immigrants. You know, and a lot of, like I said, Imam Shibley's been here for a long time. You know, I don't know, he might have even been here before I was born. But, you know, still, he's perceived by certain groups as being foreign, right? That I can say as an American, perceived as being a true, authentic American, there's certain things I can get behind this microphone and I can say that you can't say. There's certain things that white Americans can get behind this mic and say that you can't say, or even I can't say sometimes, right? Because there's a hierarchy. There's a racial hierarchy in America. Of course, Anglo-Saxon at the top, then there are other whites, and you have blacks, right? So often we don't have to be concerned about, you know, whether or not when I finish this talk, I walk out the door, FBI is going to grab me up. Usually, you don't have to worry about that. Or they're going to sort of try to trap me, try to convince me to go blow something up, right? And that's what they do. They target our youth. They come in the masjid. They have their agents, you know, and that's well established that they do that. You know, and this is nothing new. There's something called COINTELPRO during the 60s. They did with the civil rights movement. You know, they're targeting people, you know, entrapment cases and things like that. The gang codes and mob codes, you know, where they would imprison people for things they didn't do just so they can get them off the street. And a lot of people are still in prison today because of that. See, it's like we have extraordinary rendition sent you to Guantanamo Bay, right? It's all real stuff, right? And I just believe that as a convert, because I have a certain privilege that the rest of you don't have, you know, that there's an additional obligation I have, and I mean this not only for black converts, I mean white converts more so than myself, that when, for instance, we're contacted by media, right, to speak about any particular issue, that we're now in a situation where I have the opportunity to add an additional element to the events, right? As opposed to me trying to see myself as like, you know, I'm just like the rest of you, that we're all under attack. I said, no, we're not all under attack. You're under attack. Now, I'm under attack by extension, right? But not so much you as you are, you see. Yeah, and so because I'm given an additional opportunity to say something, that instead of accepting mainstream narrative, that we should be able to ask the right questions. Certain happens, it's like, well, who witnessed this? Right? Where's the footage of the chase and the bombs being dropped, right, in the street? Where is it? Right? Not saying they didn't do it, but I'm just saying, you said that this thing happened. But because of the track record that you have, that you haven't, right, proven yourself to be trustworthy. You said they're weapons of mass destruction, right? Right? Amongst other things. I mean, why should I believe you now? Right? If you say Muslims did that, okay, and they had, you know, box cutters and things like that, who saw it? Who reported that? That these Muslims were supposed to be on airplanes? And I'm not saying who did 9/11. I'm just saying that we are shuhada ala nas. كذلك جعلناكم أمة وسطا. It made you into a justly balanced nation, a immediate nation, a moderate nation. لتكونوا شهداء على الناس, so that you can be witnesses over humanity. ويكون الرسول عليكم شهيدا, and that the messenger be a witness over you. And the worst thing, one of the worst things that one can do in Arabic is called shahadatu zur, bearing false testimony. And often that's what we do when we accept sort of mainstream media reports, you know, about this person did this person did that, without questioning, asking the right questions. That you know, who saw it? Who heard it? Right? Who are these people with respect to their relationship with these individuals? Or is all the reports coming from the enemy of these people? Right? I mean, your enemy becomes the witness, the jury, the judge, and executioner. Right? So any one of us could be grabbed up today, and then they start a story about us, and we'll believe it. Why? Or we accept it because we're afraid, or we want to be accepted. And I just think that we have to acknowledge that dynamic. So I'm not trying to encourage you to, you know, come out and yeah, we should do what I would necessarily do, because there's a lot of danger that you're surrounded with danger. I'm just saying that that at least we should understand that when we come out and we condemn things that we haven't done, that we reinforce the stereotype. We should rather say, you know, listen, why do I have to apologize for this? Why do I have to condemn? Why do I, you know, and what happens is that while we are in the midst of all this condemnation, and they're telling, why are no Muslims saying anything about this? And Muslims are always saying things about it. Right? We're taking side with imperialism. We've almost done almost everything, you know, that you know we probably shouldn't do. And still they say, yo, why are no Muslims? Why are no Muslims saying this? Why are no Muslims saying that? And basically, what happens at the end of the day, we're never able to get to the bottom of anything. We're never able to interrogate the accuser, right? And say, well, where's your proof of this? Where's your proof of this man did this, or this woman did that? Where's your proof? You see, you know, or even that's why did they do it? It's like oh, why he's Muslim? That's why he did it. All right? Right. Why is he a Muslim? One of them does it. Why do it? Oh, some like psychological problem. He just snapped out, right? He did it as a Muslim. That was it. So, well, maybe it's conditions. Well, why are not all the Muslims doing it? I mean, we got a billion Muslims in the world, and why are we just going around and blowing up everybody and killing everybody? Kill the whole world. Yeah. I mean, and all throughout our history, why didn't we do it? So those are some things like I said, I've been sort of musing over and pondering about, and I'm just sort of interested in knowing what your thoughts on those things, and you know, I guess we can have a bit of a conversation about them, inshallah.
You raised a very good point, and I hope there is a board of directors here. They should take a note of what you just said, why we have to apologize and condemn if each and every single thing happens anywhere in the United States. Second thing is that about the assimilation, I don't think that we need to change ourselves, our principles and our values, to be assimilated.
Right.
We have the example of Amish and other communities here. If we believe in hereafter, then we can live like Amish people.
Yeah.
Okay?
Well, you don't have to go even that far. You can go to the Chinese, the Japanese. You follow me? There are people who they're not changing who they are in order to be accepted in America.
What saddened me recently is that the lack of moral strength in our community when it came to the question of burial of somebody. And it really, really saddened me because we are not pretty much strong politically, also we are very vocal, but when it came to the burial of somebody, I felt that we let down our values.
Yeah.
Because, and our moral responsibility. And we have to search on this, that where we are right now.
Right, yeah, I agree. And I think it's a really serious question of the authenticity of our brotherhood. Say, are we truly brothers? I mean, there are people who I've known for years that I've come to the point that where there are very few Muslims I really trust, unfortunately, in the sense that very few Muslims I trust that if I were to be sort of framed for doing something, that most people, I believe, would just say, oh, well, I didn't even know that he was involved with something like that. I mean, I would never, I wouldn't have expected it. We like throw the Muslims underneath the train in a second. Instead of saying, well, listen, I'll believe it when I see your proof and I talk to that. And let me hear, because that's the other part too, is that all the people who are accused of things, and you never hear them speak. It's like you never hear them speak. So-and-so did this. Okay, well, let's hear him say he did it. You never hear it. You never see it. You see, and they might actually say it, but it'll comfort us. It's like, well, okay, well, he did it. He said it. He just said it, right? He looked believable. He didn't look like he was coerced, right? And he said why he did it. But it's like when you have individuals, it's like, well, they did it for this reason. And then the person who's giving you this information is, we would call the enemies. Like in a court, in Islamic court, it wouldn't, like, my enemy becomes my character witness. It's like, it doesn't make sense. It's like, he doesn't like me. He means harm for me. Now, how has he become my character witness? He takes my confession, he reports my confession. He says I said it. Of course he could lie on me. So, I mean, it's how true is the brotherhood? So, do we truly care about one another? I mean, God forbid, someone, tried to do something with Imam Shibli. I mean, who's going to come out to rally for, his release, whoever it may be? I mean, God forbid, or they talk about deport or whatever. It's like, where are the Muslims? I mean, where are the believers? Put it like that. I mean, why do we lay down so easily for stuff? It's like, it's like, we can shake a little bit, shaking like, oh my God, they're scared. It's not like God came and beat you up. It's like, oh my God, we just, throw the Muslim under the train. A little bit of pressure, oh my God, FBI's here, or whatever it's like, throw them under the train. Police here, yeah. Oh, well, I didn't really know him that much. I sat with him a couple of times, but I really didn't know him that well. Yeah, no. That's subhanAllah. This doesn't, and we have to change that. We really have to be real. And we can't do it if we are trying not to have certain conversations, you see. And I think that this whole racial element that's involved with this, I guarantee you, if more Muslims start to call this what it is, what it truly is anti-Arab racism. And everybody's an Arab. You're Pakistani, you're an Arab. If you're Afghani, you're an Arab. If you're Iranian, you're an Arab. If you're Syrian, it doesn't matter. If you're Bosnian, you're an Arab. As a matter of fact, there's a Bosnian brother who just finished his PhD in UC Berkeley, and he's on his way back home. And he was telling me a story the other day about how when he first came to America in 2007, and when he got to customs, and the customs agent saw his passport and saw his name was Ahmed, and he looked at it and he said, "You don't look like Ahmed." You understand what I'm saying? So Muslim it's not a religion. It's a religion. No, Muslim is a race. It means somebody looks like you. And those who are honest will admit this. And almost everywhere I've gone, when I was at University of San Francisco, same thing I said to the students there. Everybody's like, yeah, these are non-Muslims. Room full of non-Muslims. Muslim, yeah, brown person. These foreign people, right? The woman, the reporter, same thing. Yeah, that's what they think about.
Very beautiful and very practical, pragmatic analysis of segmentation and racism component to understand the Islamophobia phenomenon. There is also other aspects like the fear of unknown coupled with ignorance that's playing, right? And if one really is cognizant about the historical perspective, this is not new. It happened to all the prophets who came up, with a new message, and to people the status quo, because they could not handle the truth, they labeled the prophets and killed many. That's what happened in Jerusalem. Isa alayhi salam, apparently they say, but Allah took him out. And all, like even Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was not different. All the friends and families and the same Quraysh, they all ganged up against him in the small group. Right? And it's the same. The Constantine was the king, and the Paul came and he was put in jail. And so the minorities have been always discriminated against, whether it's not only Arab, but however there is the media has tactfully labeled it all. Of course, Arab discrimination is there, but Muslims are not impugned. It's not against it. So I just wanted to add that component, that if we are cognizant about the historical facts, it's nothing new. It's been through centuries from the beginning of humankind. So it's the follies of humankind. So the cure for this is standing firm of truth and removing the jahiliyyah, ignorance, and not play by the victim. If we play by the victim or with the victim attitude, is when we are not capable or we are not immune. We do not have the ammunition of facts and knowledge and who we are. Right. So once we have that, then we don't play, and then we change the course. The jahiliyyah we turn into light. So that's what we need to do as Muslims. So it's not in this country the same thing. 2 million African Americans are here in jail. It happened to Italian, it happened to Jewish people, it happened to everybody. So it's the phenomenon of human ignorance and jahiliyyah. So well, definitely overcome by knowledge and
definitely racism is an aspect of jahiliyyah, and I would argue that, like for instance, the dynamics of racial oppression in the world today are different than what they were during the time of Paul or during the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that there's a whole sort of I guess you'd say corpus of literature and scientific theory. I mean, there were centuries of like indoctrination into this idea that people are racially differentiated in such a way that they don't originate from the same place, and that some are better than others, and that their behavioral characteristics can be determined by the basis of their skin color. And so it's a little bit different. But yeah, overall, I agree that, so we do have to stand firm. We have to expect the type of resistance that we get, and we can't allow it to make us change our faith, you see. And I think that sometimes that's what happens with Muslims. I imagine that some of the sisters may have questions too, so I don't want to discriminate. So if somebody maybe can, I guess, write a question, or if sisters are brave enough to scream. Get the brother in the green shirt.
Jazakallah khair. I didn't realize how old the Imam Shibli was until tonight. I love you. I would say really, but the biggest part of the problem probably is us. As they say in the election campaign, if you don't identify yourself, your competitors can identify you and define you. We as Muslims, I am in business and I hear on the phone a lot of time, I'm a good Christian, I'm a good Jew, I'm a good this, I'm a good that. we should be able to say, I'm a good Muslim.
Right.
And we should define ourselves before somebody else define us. And our definition comes from teaching our kids how to be proud to be a Muslim. And when we talk here from the member, and we do in khutbah, we shouldn't talk about America as the third person. And we say in America or in this country. No, we should say in this country of ours. We shouldn't alienate ourselves and talk about America as if we are new immigrant or we are a stranger from.
Right.
And I hear that a lot. We should say this country of ours that we love and we will defend and so and so. And we still make statement to what we want to say.
Right.
We shouldn't just be Muslim praying, going 5 times a day, and our neighbors and everybody else, nobody knows that we are Muslim, and we are just happy that we pray 5 times a day and being very quiet and nobody knows what we're doing.
Right.
And so power comes also from knowledge. We should know what these people think. So when somebody asks us, and when somebody come here from Rutgers University or Princeton, and ask us why your ladies cover their heads, or why your ladies sit in the back by themselves, we shouldn't be on the defense front trying to be very apologetic and defensive about it. We should know what their book said, and how our religion compared to their religion, treat the women more superior than their religion or what they claim their religion is. And we should be able to answer them that. And I was just looking today, and in the last couple of weeks, something came to my attention. They have a group so-called the Women of the Wall, that they go pray by the wall in Jerusalem, and the Orthodox Jews stopping them, and the police was arresting them because they tried to mingle with the men, and they not dress the proper way that they're supposed to be. You know, when we have this knowledge, we can answer these people and talk very openly, instead of being on the defense front trying to be apologetic for everything.
Right.
Inshallah, we have 4 minutes, so please shorten your comments and questions. Inshallah.
Yeah, go ahead, brother.
Actually, on the subject of condemnations, I remember asking someone, they're saying that with organizations, the issue is whenever an event happens, they're sort of called upon to condemn it. And if they don't, there's always this question. And as we saw in Boston, even despite the strong stance that Imam Said Webb and their community took, their name was still like run through the mud.
Right.
So the question is, what would you suggest be the way in which organizations should respond to these sorts of things?
Right. I'm going to answer that question after I say a couple things about the first two brothers. Like, we can try to define ourselves, but we're still going to be defined by others regardless. I think what's important is for Muslims, that we definitely arm ourselves with knowledge of the Deen, and begin to develop enough confidence about the religion, the knowledge of religion, so that if we are asked, that we can give the right responses. But there are always going to be people who try to frame the conversation in such a way or present us in a certain light that there's nothing we can do about it. We can just put our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you see. You know, so we can't think that I'm going to make this nice video about Islam, and when the non-Muslims see it, they're going to love it. No, it doesn't work that way. I think we need to have a bit more interaction with people, that people will lose the sense of strangeness about your relationship with them if you interact with them more, at least with those who want to. Because not everybody wants to. See, that's the other part of it as well, is that, there's a certain element of ignorance amongst some of them, but I believe that most of them is not ignorance. It's a refusal to be mature. Like I'm not going to give a person an excuse if they're going to stereotype me. I'm not going to try to make an excuse. Oh, they just don't know about Islam. No. That you should know, those people are mature enough to know that if you do something, I'm not going to say, Imam Muhammad, I'm going to go judge you on the basis of what you did. That's not ignorance. That's the choice. I chose it. I'm going to judge you because it's like I see a black guy on TV, murder in a certain way. Like every time you have to be mature to know that every individual is an individual. You see, and we have to demand that from them. No, I demand that you judge me as an individual. No, I'm not going to apologize for what other Muslims do. I demand you say, listen, those people are Muslims too. I disagree with what they believe and the way they understand it. I think it's wrong. But I only represent me. I can't represent the entire community. And actually, I just saw earlier today, there was a link from one particular brother's site, and it had in the headline that the official Muslim response to the Boston tragedy. You know, I was like, well, what do you mean the official Muslim response? Yeah. No, your official response to the Boston tragedy. You can't represent everybody else, you know, out here, you know. So
ask him what is your approximate.
Yeah, right. Right. So it's in terms of like how to respond. Again, that's going to, you know, differ from one particular person to another. But I think that the best thing we can do when these type of incidents occur is to say, listen, we can maintain silence and say, listen, you know, there's not enough information for us to say anything about anybody. Yeah. There's still an investigation. People have been accused. That's what they say on the news, right? There hasn't been any sort of conviction, and they haven't had a day in court, and say that they've proven that these guys did what they said they did. But we've already judged. They did it, right? Because the people in the public said that they were the ones who did it, or the FBI or the police said they're the ones who did it, right? We said, listen, I refrain from, I won't say anything. I have nothing to say about it. I don't know. It's not something that Islam approves of, but hey, there's nothing I can say about those people. I don't know. And I think that's, you know, that Imam Malik said, Junnatul alam la ajri. That the shield of the learned person is, I don't know. It's a shield. It's opposed to thinking that we have to make a statement. We don't have to make a statement about everything. So, you know, I don't have enough evidence. I don't have any evidence of anything. You know.
And
so,
we shouldn't also speak to them at all. Because, I mean, if you can't come here to ISCJ and say, what do you think of this guy who did so and so in Boston? What has got to do with me?
Right,
As
exactly.
an individual.
Right, yeah.
Go talk to him. His father, his uncle, his family. You coming to talk to me because I'm Muslim?
Right, exactly.
What to do with me?
Right, exactly. No, and that's a good point, because like when I had the interview with one of the USA Today.
To the action. You got to be limited to the people. Period.
Right.
And no naming, no religion to be involved in this.
Right. Yeah, and I was just going to say this for the answer. Like one of the things that I said to women USA Today, because she really was, to me, was pretty clear that she came with an agenda. She didn't know anything about Zaytuna, didn't know anything about the founders, you know, and so she at one point asked me a question. She said to me, I want to go back to DC, and I want to be able to tell them something like, what you represent. I mean, tell me what you represent. Tell me what you don't represent. She actually said that. That was a question. Tell me what you don't represent. And I said to her, why would I do that? Why would I tell you what I don't represent? I don't see how it furthers your understanding of me by telling you what I'm not. Say, I'm not a terrorist, I'm not a rapist, I'm not a criminal. Right? And see, the message is like, well, the Muslims, they're not criminals, they're not terrorists. That doesn't further understanding of me or Islam. Right? By me telling you what I'm not. Rather, I tell you what I am. You see? And, you know, so you have some people who just, they're in the business of demonization and distracting from more important issues in society, like economy, right? And about, you know, for instance, militia growing in America, you know. So alhamdulillah, I appreciate you taking the time to engage in this discussion. You know, may Allah protect us all. I mean, may protect our families, protect our children. You know, may He give us the fortitude and certitude so that we can walk firm and confidently on the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah to strengthen our faith, to make us love righteousness, to help us to hate unrighteousness. اللهم حبب إلينا الإيمان وزينه في قلوبنا وكره إلينا الكفر والفسوق والعصيان واجعلنا من الراشدين. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وسبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم.
بارك الله خير. أذان إن شاء الله. Can we put the picture back in شاء الله?